Coming up on the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
I think it's more in the approach, or kind of the attitude that we're taking towards it. I mean, certainly I think if, whenever it's been attributed to many people, but I've heard it attributed to Martin Luther when he was asked like how long people should pray every day. And he said like an hour. And this guy was like, I don't have an hour. He's like, well, then you need to pray for 2 hours. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Like if someone tells me they don't have 5 minutes in their day to pause, I'm like, you need 10 then. It's like, really, you don't have 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes somewhere in the day. If you don't have 5 minutes, you have 2 minutes. So I do think there is an argument for like, you do have the time. But if the approach to it is like, now I got to meditate, like that's not going to be helpful. It should be more of a get to than a have to. And part of how we get there is just in trying it and practicing it.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis, a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. Join your hosts, Billy and Brian, a couple of average dudes who will serve as your armchair life coaches as we share our life experiences, both the good and the bad, in an effort to help us all better understand how we can enjoy and make the most of the life we have left to live in a more meaningful way. Take a deep breath, embrace the present, and journey with us through the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. I'm your host, Billy, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend, Brian, on the bass. How are you doing over there, Brian?
I am golden today.
Ooh, golden.
Golden.
That sounds fantastic.
Sparkling even.
I love it. Fantastic. Are you golden because we have two big firsts on the episode today?
It's kind of a big deal today, this show.
Excellent. So earlier this week, we had our very first guest, and that meant that we had to do our first remote episode.
We were not up to the challenge.
We really thought we were up to the challenge. We thought that we had it nailed. We practiced earlier in the week.
We rehearsed. It went flawlessly.
And then when we brought our guest into the Zoom chat to record, and we went to record, things did not go as smoothly.
That's right about when things fell apart. But lucky for the listeners, we have a snippet of our confusion that we're going to include at the end of this episode. So make sure you listen through this episode, and at the end, we've got some good comedy for you.
Yeah, it's golden. It's golden. We were really we were really doing our very best to look like professionals in front of a professional. But we're very excited because today's episode, we are featuring Sarah Rudell Beach. And so we would like to play that interview for you right now. Sarah is a former high school social studies teacher who is now a Mindful Schools certified mindfulness instructor, as well as a Mindful Schools faculty member. She is also author of the books Mindful Moments for Busy Moms, Mindfulness for Children, and Breathe. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we like to, at our first episode, Brian and we shared what 10 roles we play in our lives. And that's going to be like a reoccurring segment that we want to have on our show. And since you're our first guest, we would like you to share what are 10 roles that you fulfill in your daily life?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked me this too in advance. So I'm going to read my list because it actually took me a while to figure out my list. So I have mom, teacher, wife, dancer and dance mom, which is all one, writer, dog owner, book nerd, frequent swearer, lover of sparkly things, and a Schitt's Creek superfan.
Wonderful.
That's a very broad list. You seem like a well-rounded person.
That is a great list. I have so many questions, like just on that list that I want to ask you. So we all then asked you of those 10 roles, we're going to ask you to choose 3 that you're most looking forward to in the second half of your life.
Okay. So I chose dancer and dance mom, teacher, and I didn't know I would get 3. So now it's like, okay.
I'm curious about frequent swearer. Can we choose frequent swearer?
I mean, I don't know if like
No,
that's what I'm really looking forward to in the second half of life.
How will okay, but that's the one that we wanted. That stands out. So what's the third one that you're looking forward to most in the second half of life?
Gosh, I would probably go with mom then. Yeah.
I'm gonna second that, just because I know what you're going through. If you have younger children like I do, I have 11 through 4 right now, and I can't wait to be a parent when I don't have to find food laying on the floor.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to, you know what I mean? Or hearing loud, strange noises in the house, across the house, and then you pause a moment and you're like, is there any crying? Okay. You know what I mean? I'm also looking forward to that with you.
Yes. My kids are both into double digits now, and that is lovely. So
Brian just magically pulled out a plastic bag that was lying on the floor. He's like, these are things you just find.
Why didn't somebody throw this plastic bag away? It's empty. It's clearly empty. Anyway.
Will you tell us a little bit about being a dancer and a dance mom?
Yes. So yeah, both my kids are competitive dancers. And when my daughter started dancing in kindergarten, or she actually started before that at the studio that we were at, they had a mom's class. And I was like, that sounds awesome. So I joined the moms dance. I mean, it's not just moms, but it's mostly moms. And yeah, it's awesome. So I dance in that group. I have another performance line that I dance in. So that's just super fun. It's just a fun outlet. And in many ways, dance is kind of like a mindfulness practice for me, because we do tap dance, which is something I never did as a kid. I was a gymnast, so I have like some talent, but never tapped. And it requires so much precision and concentration. And so it's like a good practice where I just focus on that and only that, because I can't be thinking about the steps of doing a buffalo and worrying about tomorrow's to-do list. Like, just can't hold both of those. So.
And since we're friends on Facebook, I see you promote a lot of times during like the holiday season.
Yeah.
So like, where do you perform during that time?
Yeah. So one of my dance groups, we like to think of ourselves as Minnesota's answer to the Rockettes, because we are a holiday high kick line. And in non-COVID years, we perform at senior homes and hospitals and malls and various venues throughout the Twin Cities to bring Christmas joy and dance. And I get to dress up like a Rockette, like it's super sparkly, hence the lover of sparkly things. I get to rhinestone things. So it's all great.
You've already given me something I've never had before, which is I've never known anyone that's actually been in a kick line. I mean, they're super cool, but it's nice to meet somebody that's actually in a kick line that, you don't just see on TV. You ever get that where you see something on TV and you're like, do people really do that? I don't know if anybody I know really does that. Well, it's good validation that kick lines, real people do kick lines, and cool.
Yeah, a bunch of middle-aged moms. It's awesome.
Amazing. That's amazing.
And then you talked about being a dance mom too. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's so fun that it's something that both of my kids and I do. So we're always at the studio. Again, this year, different. I also teach dance at the studio as well, or assist in dance classes. So that's fun. So it's kind of our like second home. So yeah, it's just super fun to have that to share with my kids.
It's also very interesting that you picked it up later in life. It sounds like you didn't grow up dancing. Most dancers do that. Once you start when you're a child, you just stay in it. I know this because my sister owns a chain of dance studios in Wisconsin. So I'm very familiar with the whole dance thing. But she came up because my cousin danced, and my cousin had danced since she was small, and my aunt danced, so it was something that was very much passed down in our family. So why do you think you just decided it was for you and decided to start that?
Well, so as I said, I was a gymnast, which, is very dancey, or at least back in the 80s when I was a gymnast, it was dancey. Now it's very like, oh my gosh, it's crazy the things that they have to do now. And when I was in college, I was in a dance group, just a informal, like I didn't study dance in college, but an informal dance group. And then really it didn't do much of it at all until I had my daughter, and then saw that they had mom's classes. Just thought it was genius.
My niece dances for the College of St. Ben's. So, and she's been dancing since she was 3-4 years old. So I actually like going to the recitals and stuff like that. They're enjoyable. I don't want to sit around and watch other people's kids dance, but I will go and watch my niece dance. And even when I'm there, when other people's kids are dancing, it's really impressive what they're able to do. So I applaud you, and I applaud your children for being dancers. And it's a fun activity.
It is. Yeah.
So then you put down teacher. And so tell us a little bit more, because you have a traditional public schools teaching background, but then you're also a mindfulness educator teacher as well. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I was a classroom teacher for 17 years, and came to my mindfulness practice while I was in the classroom. And then just as I was learning more about mindfulness and started training and learning to be a mindfulness instructor, just was like, oh my gosh, people need to know this. Like, I could see how stressed out my kids were, and how stressed out, or kids meaning students, and how stressed out my colleagues were. And it was like, I know this thing that's really helpful, and other people don't know this. Again, this was like 6-7 years ago. And so, made the transition to mindfulness teaching. And so it's been a really fun kind of career shift to move into a different way of teaching. And so I always consider myself a teacher, even though I'm not, in the classroom every day, but I'm doing a lot of work, especially now teaching teachers mindfulness and helping teachers cope with the stress of teaching, and then teaching teachers to share mindfulness with their students.
I've done mindfulness conferences and stuff like that, and led sessions with educators as well. And one thing that I actually stole from you is that you cannot pour from an empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I think that's so important for not even just teachers to recognize, but for all of us to recognize that if we're constantly giving, and there's nothing there to fill our cup up. I'm reading the love languages. So how do we fill our love bucket up? That sort of thing. Well, we need to take time to just mentally refresh, and in order to do that, it's important to take some time to simply just breathe. And like, we take that for granted. It's so automatic that we don't sit with our breath.
Right. It's what, so Mark Williams and Danny Penman, who I think you've read this books. I know I've talked to you about it.
Yeah. We're actually giving one away to one of our listeners, because I have 2 copies. Yeah, I have 2 copies. So we're doing a little giveaway. If anybody posts our whatever little logo on Instagram, we're going to pick somebody's name and give them one of the books. So yeah, okay. Thank you for bringing that up just magically.
Yes, y'all better be sharing that logo, because that is a good book. And they talk about something I use so often when I'm teaching mindfulness, especially to adults, which is this difference between doing and being mode, and how so much of our day is doing mode, and just this doing. And being feels like indulgent. It feels lazy. It's so funny. We always talk about how we're so stressed and how we hate being stressed. And then when we're not stressed, we feel like we're doing it wrong. It's like, well, no, it's just how I'm supposed to feel. And so, yeah, I think you kind of hit on it. Like, we need those moments of just stepping back and just being. I was leading actually a session just over Zoom today for high school students. We did about a 10-minute practice. And even one of the kids was like, that was great. Like, I just spent 10 minutes not doing anything. And it was kind of this like, whoa, mind-blowing moment, because how often do we just take 10 minutes to stop and close our eyes and do nothing but remain awake. We rarely do that. And it's just a refresh. One of the kids said, like, she just felt, I think she used that word, like felt refreshed. Like, oh yeah, I can go and do the rest of the things I need to do now because I just had this little reset.
And that's impressive for teenagers to go for 10 minutes. Like that's a long time. That 10 minutes is an eternity for teenagers.
Right. And it's 10 minutes. I was guiding them through most of the
Right.
practice, not a lot of silence during that time. Yeah. 10 minutes of silence is like, that was too much for me when I started practicing. But
I think we talked about it last week, that if you're just starting out, that it's good to do the guided meditations because they really do bring you back to what your intention and what your focus is. So that's, we were recommending like Calm and Stop, Breathe, and Think, but they changed their name to something else. Or there's a lot of things that you can YouTube.
My Life now is their
My
name.
Life. Yep. And then Headspace as well. Headspace is, and I feel like Headspace is doing something with like a promotion with teachers, I believe.
They are, I believe, all teachers. And I think Calm is too,
Okay.
that you can get it for free now during COVID. And I think Headspace is doing something on Netflix, right?
They are. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit later. You haven't watched any of the episodes yet?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
I only watched Schitt's Creek on Netflix.
You only watch Schitt's Creek? So they actually, you'll enjoy this too. There's the Headspace little 20-minute videos that they have that just kind of talk about what mindfulness is. And then they actually lead you through a mindfulness meditation. And I actually did the first episode last night and I was eating. And then when they got to the meditation, I'm like, I'm just going to stop eating for a minute and sit here. And like when I got done, it was just refreshing. And I'm like, oh man, that felt good. But then for the frequent swearer in you, there's also the history of swear words.
Yes, I've seen that one too. I know I need to start creating my queue.
Your watch list.
Yeah.
And then you said for your third one, you talked about being a mom, that you're looking forward as you move forward into the second half, being a mom. Can you talk a little bit about what's it like being a mom now? And what do you imagine it will be like being a mom in 10 years from now?
Oh my gosh. It's so like that. I mean, I just kind of had a moment there because like my kids will be out of the house in 10 years, which is like mind blowing.
Was that a good moment or a bad moment now?
It's like, it's one of those moments of like, it's so cliche, the days are long and the years are short, but it's so true.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting. It's so funny. Before I had kids, I always thought I wanted a baby. And then like, once they were like 1 or 2, I'd be like, ew, like you have opinions and like, you express yourself and like you move and like, you're not, this cute little thing anymore. And I thought I would just not like having teenagers and all of that. And it's been totally the opposite. I would never want to go back to the infancy days. It was such a hard time for me. I talk about this in the books too. I struggled with postpartum depression. It was just such a hard adjustment for me. And now like seeing my kids become people with like opinions and like really cool thoughts and like talking about everything that's going on in politics with them, or like watching the political debates. I mean, I was a social studies teacher, so I'm a total political junkie. Or it's so fun to see them become like people and like really cool people that you want to hang out with. So I think I'm just excited to see like what they'll do. And it's so exciting. Like my daughter, who's 14, talks a lot like what she wants to do when she grows up and like volunteer things she wants to do to get ready for the things she wants to do. And it's so exciting to like, where we are in our life, like, yeah, life is a do-over. There's always changes we can make, but to be at that age and like, it's all out in front of you is really exciting to watch with little people that you made. And
your kids are pretty savvy, pretty witty.
Well, yeah, I mean,
they're your children.
Why wouldn't they be?
We talked last week, and you mentioned an article, I think, in the Star Tribune.
Yeah.
And your son, you were telling your son that you were famous, and his response.
Yeah. So the Star Tribune reviewed or referenced my book on mindfulness for children a couple months ago. And so I showed it to my son because it was in the variety section, like below the fold, but on the first page of the variety section. So, and I was like, I am famous. He's like, Mom, you are locally famous.
You know what, though? If you get famous in the United States, then you're not world famous, Mom.
Right. Yes. So they keep you humble.
Well, our goal with this podcast is for us to blow up and become famous. And then in turn, you will become famous. Or if you become famous before us, we'll ride your coattails.
Right. Go see Billy and Brian because they're giving away a book I like.
Exactly.
Okay.
Brian and I asked each other, like, elaborate a little bit more on this one here. So I'm debating between Frequent Swearer or Schitt's Creek Superfan, because I'll be honest, I've never watched Schitt's Creek, and I know everybody says it's amazing, and I haven't, but I just haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. Well, so now I'm going to talk about that. Okay. And I was super late to the game on that one too. I think we just started watching it. So I'm like a new Superman, but I think I'm going to be a Superfan for life. It is just such a beautiful show. And just the message around inclusivity and love and like, just, I saw an interview with Dan Levy, who was one of the writers, and just said like, what happens if a rich family loses everything? Well, all you have left is love. And to write this story in this town where, they're quirky and goofy, but everyone's accepted. And to write a queer love story where there's no homophobia is just, it's such a refreshing take. And it led to some really cool conversations with my kids. I know there's debates, like, should parents let their kids watch it? I would say yes. Like, with me as their mom, they've heard the F-bomb many times. So like that was not an issue, and just led to some neat conversations about relationships and who you love and the whole spectrum of sexuality and everything. It's such I just can't say enough. So you need to watch it.
You are not the only person to tell me that. It's that show gets a ringing endorsement from everybody that I talk to. Brian, you watch that one?
If for nothing else, no, I've seen episodes though, because my wife is also a super fan. So of course it's on all the time. I've absorbed by osmosis. I'm usually doing other things because I don't have the luxury of watching television because I have so much stuff going on. So, but yeah, Eugene Levy is a genius. He's always been a genius. Everything he's ever done has been genius. So for that fact alone, it's worth watching. He's brilliant.
Well, we're going to go to break right now. And then when we come back, Sarah is going to tell us what mindfulness is and what the benefits are, and answer any other generic question that we might have about mindfulness and any advanced questions that we might have about mindfulness, because as she wrote in her notes, I know this shit. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, giving our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words helps us on our quest to reach the top of the podcast charts. Finally, since you can't make a mixtape for your friends and loved ones like you used to do, share this podcast with them instead. We hope our experiences resonate with others and inspire people to live their best lives. Thanks again. And now, let's take a minute to be present with our breath. If you're listening somewhere safe and quiet, close your eyes and slowly inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do that one more time. Inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and open your eyes. You feel better? We certainly hope so. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We are here with certified mindfulness instructor Sarah Rudell Beach. Thank you once again for being here. So let's just kind of start off with this question. Tell us a little bit more about what mindfulness is, but then will you also talk about what mindfulness is not?
Yeah, absolutely. So mindfulness is paying attention, and it could really just be as simple as that, as paying attention, which is simple, but not easy. Again, I do a lot of work in schools and shared this with a group of fourth graders, like mindfulness is paying attention. And one of the fourth graders just said, that is so hard. Yes, it is. And I kind of find it reassuring, mindfulness goes back thousands of years in various religious and philosophical and secular traditions. And so I find it reassuring that like 2,500 years ago, people were like, OMG, there's so much to pay attention to and so much going on. I just need to sit and breathe. Okay, so it's not just a crisis of our age. So it's paying attention, but with kindness and curiosity. So there's this real kindness towards experience. So it's paying attention, and whatever arises, we tend to that with kindness. So if what we notice, we pay attention and we notice like all these really weird thoughts, or we notice uncomfortable emotions, or we notice judgments and biases, and we notice it with kindness, like, oh yeah, I'm a human and I judge things. That's what a brain does. So I can hold that with kindness. I'm a human and I get angry, so I can hold that with kindness. So there's a real kindness to the paying attention, and a real curiosity, this sense that I don't know what's going to happen. I think I know what's going to happen because my brain is also a predicting machine, but I really don't know what's going to happen. So can I be open? We talk about sometimes the beginner's mind in mindfulness, this idea that we can see something almost the way a child would. I mean, in many ways, children are very naturally mindful. I imagine, Brian, with your youngest, like you just kind of see that, like they're fascinated by everything. And as adults, we're just kind of like, been there, done that. But getting back a bit of that curiosity and that ability to wonder about the world.
I've got a great story you just brought to mind. I was doing the laundry when my oldest was about 5 years old. And I'm putting the laundry detergent into the bin. And he says, what's that stuff? And I said, well, it's just laundry detergent. He said, well, what does it do? I said, it makes your clothes smell good. It helps loosen dirt, that kind of stuff. He goes, wow, that's powerful stuff. So exactly as you're talking about that, and I thought to myself, my gosh, he's right. And I've been taking it for granted. So I no longer do.
Yeah. We live in an amazing world. I mean, there's so much messed up in the world. And I remember my son once when we had to replace the toilet seat. And so it was one of those, like, instead of slamming down, like it just gently, he was probably 6 or 7. He must've put that thing down 800 times. He was like, this is the coolest. There's just some really ingenious things we've created as humans. And just being able to see those, we have what's called this negativity bias, where we're much more likely to attend to the negative because that's what keeps us safe. Like we've inherited this from our ancestors who freaked out about things, and they passed on those freak out genes to us. So we have to work a little harder to kind of counteract that negativity bias and really see those good things. It's a lot easier for those good things to kind of slip by.
I like that you also talked about that even when you're practicing mindfulness, you might be experiencing discomfort, or you might be experiencing an array of emotions, which could range from, gosh, I'm so happy, because today I got to see my friends, but, or it could range from like anger and hostility, but you're recognizing it and saying, how do I come at this from kindness, that sort of thing. So that kind of goes back to that question about like, what do people get wrong about mindfulness? What are misconceptions that people have about mindfulness? Because I wonder if there are people out there who think, I have people who will tell me all the time that I'm doing it wrong.
Right.
And I'll tell them, if you're doing it right.
Exactly. Yeah. So this idea that it's supposed to feel a certain way is, I don't blame people, because you look at just Google stock photos of people meditating, and it is just the weirdest shit you'll ever see. I mean, there are chakras exploding out of people's heads, and like, it's just like they're doing awkward poses on jagged rocks. And it's a lot of times it might feel very relaxing and very nourishing and very soothing. I like to say that being calm is often a nice side effect of mindfulness, but that's not the point. Like, we don't practice mindfulness. Oh, this is the 11-year-old coming in because I just swore.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
Actually, we might not leave that. We might leave that in.
Okay. Anyway, I always like to say I'm a very sweary mindfulness teacher.
I'll tell you that I remember taking a class with you, and you dropped an F-bomb, and it was in school.
Yeah.
And it's after hours. It's after
school,
hours,
just for teachers.
Yeah, after school, just for teachers, not with students around. But like, you were telling a story, but you're so authentic, and like that. I think, to me, that is a real appeal of listening to you talk about what mindfulness is. Because take for example Mark Anderson, who we went on the M2 retreat with. He just seems like one of the most kindest men. I don't know Mark that well, but I don't imagine that like he swears, or like even a thought like that comes out of him, and maybe it does. And like, I look at him and I'm like, I'll never, like, he is a Buddhist monk to the nth degree, but I'm like, well, Sarah's a teacher and I'm a teacher. Like, there's a connection there, because there's such a relatability, because you will drop an F-bomb whenever you damn well please. So I can connect with that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another misconception too, this idea that like, if you're mindful, you are a certain way, and that you sound like an NPR host, and that you carry yourself in a certain way, that you never get angry, you're just even keel the whole time. Like, you are still human. It's interesting with COVID and everything, we're doing all of our retreats online, which means we're doing retreat at home. And normally you go to a place for retreat, and like all your meals are made for you, and you're away from everything, and you give up your phone, and it's completely isolated. And that can be a beautiful practice, but it's also very unrealistic. There's one, I can't remember the author who said this, because it was only a teacher who quoted it to me. But he's like, you don't go to Tibet for a retreat. Like, the best place for a retreat is like suburban Ohio. Like, just go hang out like somewhere random in the world. Like, that's where we should be on retreat. So this really is a practice of being with our full human experience. And so if you're sitting down and you practice and you notice that you're agitated and frustrated or stressed, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you're agitated and frustrated and stressed. And then you notice that. And okay, how am I going to meet this? Am I resourced enough to handle this? If I am, great, I can sit with it. If not, I'm going to notice my breath, or I'm going to go somewhere else, or you do something else that's resourcing. So I think that's another big misconception, that it's something separate from our life, or that it's going to completely change who we are. I mean, in many ways, it just changes how we relate to what happens, how we relate to experience.
I like that you talked about having the resources available to navigate whatever that emotion is, because a couple episodes ago, Brian and I talked about how toxic masculinity and emotional illiteracy has a significant impact on men's emotional well-being. And that this came from the Samaritan study that we talked about. And they talked about how this emotional illiteracy and this toxic masculinity have been identified as a possible catalyst for the high suicide rates in men between the ages of 40 and 60. And I imagine when you do a retreat, that the demographic leans towards female. And I'm curious if I imagine if men are there, they're open to it. I'm kind of curious, what differences do you see between how men and women respond to mindfulness and meditation?
Yeah, and I don't know if I can speak from my personal experience. I mean, generally, like you said, a guy who shows up on a mindfulness retreat is pretty committed and knows what they're getting into. There was a study a couple years ago from Brown University, and the headline was terrible. Like, never trust the headlines around mindfulness research. It was like, mindfulness doesn't work for men. It's like, what? And what they actually found was like, it did work, but there were some significant gender differences between the men and women in the study. And these were college students too. But what they found especially was negative affect, which is the psychological word for a bad mood, is basically they use that as like a measurement of subjective well-being or happiness. And generally they found that after the mindfulness intervention, women felt better and men felt worse. Men actually had, or also did show improvements, like in terms of observing experience and these, other elements of mindfulness. And so what the researchers concluded was that, so mindfulness involves getting close to emotion and looking at emotion and not pushing emotion away. I think a big part of toxic masculinity is this rejection of emotion, or this idea that emotions and masculinity don't really go together, which is ridiculous. And so for men who may have been more conditioned to not work with emotions, this opening up to emotional experience really led to a decrease in happiness. Like, there was a lot of sadness, a lot of anger, a lot of just stuff that hadn't been worked through. And so at the end of this mindfulness intervention, they felt a lot worse, whereas a lot of the women felt better because, perhaps, likely due to just social conditioning, were more in a place to be able to process that emotion. So I think there is something to that. But again, I think it's more just the cultural conditioning than it is anything problematic or difficult about mindfulness for men. It's interesting, in non-Western cultures, meditation is not really, like, most Buddhists in Asia don't meditate. It's more of like a monk practice, and the monks are mostly men. Like, it's more of a male practice, whereas here it's kind of been something, in many ways, mindfulness has very much been gendered female, or certainly sorry. It's like dinner time, noisy house. Anyway, in the West, mindfulness is something that's been, I think, gendered more female, because it emphasizes like looking inward and, these qualities of like compassion and heartfulness and things that we tend to think of as more stereotypically female.
How do you, I don't want to say recruit, how do you encourage people to then dip their toe into mindfulness? Or I remember seeing an interview with John Kabat-Zinn, who we actually got to see at the University of Minnesota. You got to actually meet John Kabat-Zinn.
I did. I got a selfie with JKZ. Like, we are like besties.
What did he say to you, or what you guys had a quick interaction, correct?
We did. Yeah. Well, I brought my book, or it was my copy of his book, and it was like, dog-eared and Post-it notes everywhere. And he was like, what? And I was like, I'm a mindfulness nerd. He's like, I am too. So we had a little mindfulness nerd moment. It was really sweet. Anyway, go on. Yes, you were talking about you.
Well, and he had something, he said something to the effect of, if you're viewing mindfulness as one more thing you have to do throughout the day, don't do it. And so I'm wondering, when you are talking to people about, or encouraging them to practice mindfulness, do you come from that lens? Like, listen, if you feel like you're adding another thing onto your plate, then please, you shouldn't practice mindfulness? Or are you saying maybe if you practiced it, then you would be able to sort out what the clutter is throughout your day? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. I'm just kind of curious.
Right. Yeah. I think it's more in the approach, or kind of the attitude that we're taking towards it. Certainly I think if, whenever, it's supposedly, I think it's been attributed to many people, but I've heard it attributed to Martin Luther, 16th century monk, Martin Luther, when he was asked like how long people should pray every day. And he said like an hour. And this guy was like, I don't have an hour. He's like, well, then you need to pray for 2 hours. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Like if someone tells me they don't have 5 minutes in their day to pause, I'm like, you need 10 then. It's like, really, you don't have 5 minutes. You have 5 minutes somewhere in the day. If you don't have 5 minutes, you have 2 minutes. So I do think there is an argument for like, you do have the time, but if the approach to it is like, oh, fuck, now I got to meditate. Like that's not going to be helpful. It should be more of a get to than a have to. And part of how we get there is just in trying it and practicing it. The way I like to think of mindfulness now, a lot of it's really informed by somatic experiencing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Peter Levine and the somatic experiencing work. Very body-based therapy used especially to help trauma survivors. And so it focuses a lot on this idea of nervous system regulation. He talks a lot about being resourced. Am I resourced enough to handle something? And there's so much evidence, that just the way we're holding our body and the way we're breathing and maybe just being able to, shut down some of the sensory channels, like, okay, take out the visual stimuli, take out the auditory stimuli, that it leads to a greater sense of nervous system regulation. And so one thing that mindfulness is doing is helping us get to kind of a new set point of regulation in the system. So many of us are living really in this constant fight or flight state, and we don't even really realize it. We are not meant to live the life that we are living. I remember when I was a new mom and I was also teaching anthropology, and, I would show these documentaries of, women who had children and they were not worried about tummy time and like mommy and me class it. Like we're not meant to raise our babies alone in the suburbs. Like we are meant to be social, relational creatures. We are not meant to be working as hard as we do and to be as overstimulated as we are. But our nervous system doesn't know that. All these changes have been just like a blip in the scale of human evolution. So we really kind of almost need to retrain our nervous system to have this set point for regulation. And so I think sometimes, that approach, you can get this very woo-woo, like find your inner child peace. Like I am not a woo-woo mindfulness teacher. Like show me the research. How is this grounded in the nervous system? And I do think that tends to appeal in general to male audiences more than kind of some of the more flowery language that you sometimes see around mindfulness. And so I share that not as like a selling point. For me, that's really kind of the where I think a lot of the juicy research is in mindfulness right now around a lot of these like trauma therapies and others. So that's a really, really long answer to your question, but I think
great answer. There's a great answer to that question.
Let me ask you this. As two practices, I'm asking this question of both of you now. Do you view it kind of like I do? I have to do certain things to take care of my body. I exercise, I eat right, I sleep enough, and I try to work in a little meditation. That's just kind of the side of things for me that gives me energy. It's another thing. It's not like something cosmic or flowery at all. It's or taking a shower. It's just, that's how you take care of your body. Do you guys agree with that?
If it's important to you, you'll make time to do it. And if working out is important to you, you'll do it. If food prep is important to you, you'll do it. And if practicing mindfulness is important to you, you'll do it. And you'll find, like, I just started out by doing like 5 minutes a day, like 3 times a week. And that was even during the summer when I wasn't even teaching and I had way more time. And I was like, I'm going to start off here, just see what this is like and see if I like it. And then I did. And then I started building up to 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon and then 10 minutes before I went to bed. So yeah, I think if it's important to you, you'll make time for it.
Yeah. And I think, so there was a study, this was just like literally like 2-3 days ago. I saw this study. I have like a Google alert set for mindfulness research. So this kept popping up and like the headline was like, was like the most obvious headline ever. It's like, mindfulness works, but not for everyone. I'm like, well, oh my God, put any noun in that sentence and it is true. Yeah, duh. And you know, and I was saying, for some people, exercise is just as effective as mindfulness. Like, fine, then great. Like I love teaching mindfulness and sharing mindfulness with people, but if someone hears what I say about mindfulness and then doesn't practice, like that's okay. Like there's different ways we can take care of ourselves. You know, maybe some people might journal, and that's a really helpful way for them to process emotion. And, you know, there's other ways we can develop self-awareness. You know, and exercising certainly is something that also helps to regulate the nervous system. Like, you know, our hunter-gatherer ancestors were able to discharge a lot of their nervous system energy because they were a lot more active than we are. So there are a lot of other things that can have that same impact. When I teach with students, we often use the approach like, this is a series of experiments. Try this. See what, don't take my word for it. Go home and try it. Try breathing a few times a day. Like, try doing this and see what happens.
That's kind of been this whole podcast. Our joke is that we're armchair life coaches, and you know, we are in no way, shape, or form experts. We're just talking about what's worked for us, and you know, if you hear something you like, go ahead and try it. And if what you're hearing about mindfulness resonates with you, then you have resources and we have like real live experts like Sarah who you can access as a resource.
We are experts at cracking wise.
We do a really, but we're not experts in recording remotely.
You know,
did that idea.
You can't be a jack of all trades, right? Like,
oh my gosh, your kids are starving because we couldn't figure this out.
That's okay. My husband ordered Applebee's. God, they're probably way happier than anything. Like, I would have made quinoa or something. It's all good.
Oh, all right. Well, to your children, you're welcome. So I guess speaking of children, you're doing a lot of work with school-age children. And I'm wondering, not only with school-age children, but even with the adults that you're working with through, are you working with adults through Mindful Schools?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just in, I guess, the day and age in which we live, where we're back in the 1300s, where we have a plague and people storming the castle. What are you hearing from them as they come into your sessions about what's the stress, or why are they there?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so we talk about this idea of nervous system regulation, and there's like multiple systems. There's like your individual nervous system, and then like collectively we have social systems that are also highly dysregulated. And so in many ways, mindfulness is this practice where, okay, let me resource myself so that I can work to make effective change in the world where it needs to happen. You know, if I am just a big stress ball with not a lot of self-awareness and I don't have good self-care tools, like I'm just going to be raging and I'm burning out. And when I can resource myself, I can then act in a way that creates effective change. I think in some ways there's kind of this notion that, or I can even see in some schools where there's this sense of like, oh my gosh, the teachers are so stressed out. And yeah, because you're giving them 8 different versions of a schedule and they have to switch to this and then they have to do this. You can't just like throw mindfulness at them as like, okay, sorry, we threw all this shit at you, but here's mindfulness, you're fine. Like mindfulness is not a substitute for meaningful systemic change in education or more broadly in the culture. Like there's a lot of shit that's going wrong that needs to be fixed. But if we are not resourced and if we can't see clearly what's happening, you know, if we're still seeing through our judgments and all of our filters and stories, our action is probably just going to inflict more harm. And so I think in many ways, these interventions for teachers, it's really as small as they can seem. they really are resourcing us to be agents of effective change in our classrooms. So first in our own nervous system, and then our classroom system, and then the school system, and then larger systems. And it's so hard because all of those, there's that, I think of this image that I saw, was a political cartoon. It was showing like all the burdens that educators are carrying, kind of like this person. And then it showed like an educator of color, and then adding on, systemic racism and oppressive white supremacy and all of that. And it's like, yeah, we're carrying all these burdens. And so we need to have these interventions at multiple levels. I don't know if I really actually answered your question, or I just kind of answered my own version of your question, but I think
your answer was really good. So whatever we originally asked and where you went was really fantastic. So one thing that I always say with mindfulness is that it's not going to solve all the world's problems. It's just going to make the world's problems a little bit easier to manage. That kind of sounds like what you were saying right there, that there are widespread systemic issues that like mindfulness isn't going to resolve that. And I like how you said you can't just throw a little mindfulness at it and think that it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And that's why I think ultimately people think it didn't work, like, oh, I'm not happy now. Well, if you're not being adequately paid and you don't have good health care, but I'm not going to turn your show into a political podcast, but like if there's other things that impact it too. But again, it comes down to and I know I've shared this story with you too, Billy, but like, when I was a new mom, which is when I first came to mindfulness, it's helping me deal with postpartum depression. And it was like, yeah, there were all sorts of systemic things contributing to my misery. Like we needed longer maternity policies, and my husband should have been able to take more time to be home with me, and better, like all sorts of systemic things that yes, I should be advocating for and marching, but on those, like I just needed to make it to 5 o'clock and not lose my shit before my husband came home. And that's where mindfulness helped. And so it's those, we need both. And I'm not going to be an effective advocate. I'm not going to be an effective white ally if I can't heal my own stuff on my own terms and take care of myself. Then any action I take is just going to perpetuate harm.
Well, like anything, and you guys are the experts, not me, but mindfulness is a way of seeing your emotions a little more clearly. Right. You take a moment to appreciate what it is you're going through. So exactly, it's just another little tool in the toolbox to help deal with the emotions, not necessarily the larger problems.
I think of it where, like, without mindfulness, it's like a school of fish that are swimming very quickly. And with mindfulness, it's a muskie in a lake that is just lazily going, and you can look at it and be like, oh, that is a muskie. That's kind of just that's one way, I guess, to oversimplify it. One last question here for you, Sarah, so then you can get and enjoy your Applebee's. What did you get from Applebee's, mind you?
I don't even know. I just heard delivery.
Surprise Applebee's. This will be good.
It'll either be a cheeseburger or like chicken fingers. And
is
either
it gonna be
lovely.
Right baby back ribs. I can't remember if there's no, that's Chili's. Never mind. That's Chili's.
Her husband's a good guy because he already knows what to get her.
He does. Yeah.
Applebee's.
Yes. I mean, DoorDash has been lovely during this pandemic. So I'm sure he just had like the saved order.
So we'll get you out on this here. What do you see yourself doing 10 years from now with regards to mindfulness?
Gosh. I think, so it's been interesting to be kind of somewhat in the ground floor, or maybe like on the first floor. Like, I don't know if I was really like ground floor, maybe like first floor in this mindfulness and education movement. I've been doing this work about 6 or 7 years now. And what's been really neat is to see this movement that started with, individual teachers who just randomly learned mindfulness and were sharing it with students. And now it's starting to become like a thing. And so now we see teachers, that have curricula and they're able to teach a program. And now we're starting to see mindfulness kind of at the school-wide or even district-wide level. So just kind of this ways I would really like to be involved in ways that we can reimagine what education is. I think in many ways, COVID is forcing us to do that. Like, I think some of these online learning components might still be there. I think we're asking, like, how much time in the seat do students need? What kind of things do we need to be teaching them? What kind of mental and emotional resources do we need to be providing students? How do we make this emotional awareness and this ability to regulate the nervous system and regulate attention? How do we make this part of education? I really hope that my next 10 years are doing that work.
Wonderful. One of the tenets of mindfulness is gratitude. And I want to extend my gratitude to you on a couple of different levels. First of all, I came to mindfulness through my therapist, Mindy Ben Dixon. And when I came back to school, you were leading a session for teachers. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember seeing you leading that class, and I'm like, who the hell is this? Mindfulness is my thing. Like, wait a minute. Who is this imposter who is leading this mindfulness class? So I remember sending you an email like, could you please tell me your credentials about what mindfulness is? And then just a wonderful email back. And I was like, okay. Because this is a big building where we are. So we don't necessarily know all the staff members. And I'm like, who the hell is Sarah Rudell Beach? But anyway, I went to your mindfulness class, and though I could already kind of dipped my toe in the water, it is your class that led me to Mindful Schools, which it's funny how the world works. Now you work for Mindful Schools. You encouraged us to take the Mindful Educators Essentials course, and then the Mindful Essentials course. And then I went and did the Mindful Educator course where I could teach my class. And then through that, I wanted to, like you, I wanted to share mindfulness with the world. And you put that passion in me, or you're one of the people who put that passion within me. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing that, because mindfulness has really been a big part of my life. And it's something, that's why I wanted to start this podcast, because I wanted to share that with as many people as I can. So thank you for that. And thank you for being a guest. We loved having you on here today. We would love if you came back and visited us again in the very near future.
Yeah. My children would probably like it too, because they might get Applebee's again. Yeah. And Billy, I want to say thank you that was really touching. So thank you. And I do remember when I made the decision to leave the school and pursue this work, there was this, like, you were starting starting to do some mindfulness sessions. And so there was this sense of, like, it's not like I'm leaving and now they're not getting mindfulness there. Like, someone was continuing to do the work. And so that was really exciting to see that. So thank you. And thanks for inviting me.
We actually sat down because when you were decided to go and do your certification and start your own mindfulness business, that people can check out, by the way, at www.brilliantmindfulness.com. And Sarah has online courses there and other courses that you can check out and other resources that you can check out, www.brilliantmindfulness.com. I was showing you my 5-year plan. And what's funny is I actually put in there 2016, 2017 school year, August 2017, turn 40, experience midlife crisis. So I was hoping that I myself was going to be a certified mindfulness instructor. And then I actually shifted jobs, I shifted roles. I went from a teacher into this dean position. And so, that was a different path that I've gone down, but I'm very happy that we've been reunited here through this podcast. And I'm so proud of you for the work that you are doing. It's such important work. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Enjoy your Applebee's. Thanks for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to help get you over the midweek hump. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Oh, and don't forget to show yourself some love every now and then, too. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Isn't Sarah amazing?
Yeah, as advertised, she was, I just can't believe all the different things she does. Like the depth of her personality is astonishing. I mean, who's in a kick line and studies mindfulness and is a teacher and, you know, I mean, all the dance, she's involved in dance. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, she joked about you can't be a jack of all trades, but she is definitely a Jill of all trades. She is. She's amazing. She's amazing. So what did you learn today from her?
That mindfulness maybe is not a fix-all, but a part of the solution. Actually, mindfulness and listening to this show are two good steps forward, but it's not going to be everything.
Yeah, I was really kind of impressed with her answer about how mindfulness is not a substitute for meaningful systemic change. She talked about we have nervous systems and we have social systems, and though one may be regulated, the other may not. So mindfulness allows us to be in a headspace, to be an agent of change, where change needs to happen, but that doesn't mean social systems can't deregulate us, that we need to have interventions at multiple levels. And it made me reconsider what I said in the episode or in the interview with her when I said mindfulness doesn't solve all the world's problems. It just makes the world's problems a little easier to manage. And now I feel I need to add on, it makes the world's problems easier to manage so that we can affect systemic and social change.
You know, if I had to just use one word that describes Sarah Rudell Beach, I think it would be dynamic.
Oh, that's a great word.
She is a dynamic person. I mean,
and a dynamic personality just to talk to. Like, I liked how she sort of talked about where she's not like foo-foo mindfulness. She's direct and speaks to the data mindfulness.
She's bringing it down to earth. You know, she's a real person and not, you know, again, we discussed it in the episode, but a lot of people can get this picture that mindfulness is some new age cosmic healing thing. It's not at all that way. It's a very practical thing that you can bring into your life, and you don't have to believe in mysticism to use mindfulness.
I love that you use that word practical. That's a great, perfect word to describe what mindfulness can be for us if we choose to use it.
It's a tool.
Yeah. And if you're thinking, well, mindfulness isn't for me, listen, that's all right too. But if you are thinking mindfulness is good for you and you're thinking that you want to learn more from Sarah, she has all sorts of resources that she talked about. Again, you can find her books on Amazon: Mindful Moments for Busy Moms, Mindfulness for Children, and her book And Breathe are all available on Amazon. Again, you can check out her courses, which are available at www.brilliantmindfulness.com. And again, what's so amazing, the circle of life, where she started out with mindful schools as a student of that, she is now the master. Once again, thank you so much, Sarah Rudell Beach, for enlightening us with your knowledge on mindfulness. We greatly appreciate that. For Brian and Sarah, this is Billy. We want to thank you for being part of this conversation. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Take care, friends. Man, I wonder why that didn't work out.
I don't know. The only thing we've changed is on my end, but you know, Sarah's should be set up like mine. You know what I mean? So
right.
I I don't get it either. We tried it. It worked. It was a snap. We were high-fiving digitally and stuff.
Yeah,
man.
it was really fantastic. So
I believe you.
I do. That is important for some reason or another. That is important. Because if we ask you for a reference at some point, we don't want you to be like, no, don't work with those two idiots.
Yahoos can't even work a fucking computer.
Hey, we're gorgeous and we're talent.
That's why we do the podcast.
That's why we're on the podcast. We're not the smart guys.
Super judgy and non-mindful of me.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with your family and friends. We will do our best to put out new content every Wednesday to get you over the midweek hump. If you want episodes to be downloaded automatically to your phone each week, all you need to do is hit the checkmark, subscribe, like, or follow button, depending on what podcast format you're using. While you're at it, feel free to leave our show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words so more people like you can easily find our show. If you're really enjoying the show and you want to help us out, feel free to make a donation to www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. That's www.buymeacoffee.com/MMC podcast. You can also access the link in our show notes. We use the money from these donations to pay whatever expenses we incur from producing the show, but ultimately, we record this show for you. So if you keep listening, we'll keep recording and releasing new episodes each week regardless. If you'd like to contact us, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like us to discuss on future episodes, feel free to email us at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. Thanks again for listening. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved.